Before I met Jane, I was practically sane. I could tie my laces and remember my name. I could whistle Dixie and I walked upright. Now I sing out of tune and I cry all night. Before I met Jane, each day was the same. I wore a suit and tie on the 8 o'clock train. But since I've met Jane, all of that's changed. Now I live on crumbs of kindness and I know no shame.
I've known Jane as a film reviewing colleague and friend for well over a decade. She is one of the most energetic, optimistic, enthusiastic and thoughtful people I've ever met, with a boundless passion for causes that champion the less well-off in society and those aspiring to better our world. Women's rights, the Greens, environmental issues, homelessness, community radio, up-and-coming musicians. These are just a few of the areas Jane has poured her energies into. But now she faces her own huge personal challenge as she battles a debilitating illness that is gradually eroding her physical mobility and shrinking her world. But, never self-pitying and ever the optimist, she's facing it all with her trademark smile, her pragmatism, and her ongoing engagement with everything that matters so much to her. This is a small insight into who she is.
Hi Jane, how you doing?
Well, we're here in my house and I'm welcoming Peter and Sharon, describing a busy day yesterday and my busy life at the moment. And at this point in time, we're lucky that I'm almost dressed and working on looking a bit more presentable for later.
It was a tough day yesterday.
Very presentable.
It was really a big day, but not tough except for my mobility issues. Made me a little bit late. I missed the exact start of the service. My stepdad's sister's husband was doing the emceeing and didn't realise I hadn't got myself in yet, so I sort of came in between the intro and the Pam's eulogy. But people understand when you come in on a walker that there's reasons for being interruptive and not quite on time. And we were out at Lilydale, travelling through lots of rain on the way there. Mark took me out, and so as non-religious people, it was more a service of remembrance and funny tales. And my youngest niece got up and read a statement for me, so I didn't have to try and navigate slowly towards a lectern that was a step. So that was very good. And when I first was a young person starting to work, at the time when Friday night, Saturday morning shopping was just coming in, I worked with a couple of young women who were my age at their family dry cleaners for a long time, and one of them came to the service, so it's basically decades since I saw her, so that was a lovely part of it for me. And my organised mum and stepdad had prepaid funerals, so that was no effort for us to make happen. It happened very smoothly, respectfully and lovely. And then there was a chance for a bit of a chit chat, and then we in Lilydale, where the cemetery we were at exists, is where the remaining dry cleaners is, with the youngest of the sisters I used to work with. So I saw her again by dropping into her shop briefly. Then stopped at my dad's because he's living in Lilydale now with a good coffee machine. So we managed to have an hour and a half or so to catch up around the kitchen table before we went to the local pub and had a family dinner, which was quite amazing because my older brother lives in Seaford, so we rarely see him between 2 years and the next kind of thing. But we were actually all there, the siblings and my dad and his partner and Mark here. So we had a dinner and Mark drove me home, and so a very big day, but really important because yesterday was the 9th of April. In a couple of days' time is the 12th of April. It's my dad's 91st birthday. So we got in early to be able to celebrate that with him, because on Sunday, which would be his traditional day of having a lunch in the Yarra Valley, I'm going to a 3CR sort of supported thing with supporting the West Papuan office here. Their consular sort of set up, and they do 4 times a year a lunch. So I'll be eating West Papuan style barbecue and stuff while they're in the Yarra Valley at a vineyard. So I don't have to do that big commute to Lilydale again. So, you know.
No, you take advantage when you can, yeah.
Well, you know, it's just amazing to me how many things manage to materialise and fall in my lap conveniently, a bit like this. So here you are, and we have a chance to, for better or worse, you know, share my
of your life. Tell us the story of your life.
You know, share the benefit of the experience of 6+ decades of ups and downs, of course, but also I hope to have the opportunity to perhaps impart things that I've learnt that have helped me cope, and things that I know now that, you know, would have made it easier earlier, and just to also spread the word of the importance of building a community around yourself, which is so, you know, supportive, nurturing. You choose your friends, your family, or who you're born with, for better or worse, and, you know, with a bit of a dysfunctional, perhaps, family dynamic, my friends are so important to me. So I'm here to celebrate community, and Sharon and Peter and radio and music and the live gig scene and the art scene.
And Mark's
and
working away.
Yeah.
Good to see.
That's how we know each other.
Exactly. We know each other from film, which stems from a time when I got a bit overwhelmed with living in Melbourne with so much possibilities constantly, too many choices to make. So for a while I went and lived in Adelaide to minimise that level of stress, inverted commas. You know, it's a good stress to have, too many good things to choose from.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But while I was there, we're done?
No, I'm just checking your walking apparatus.
Oh yeah, it's got my shoes to put on and things. I put things in a bag and it wheels them around for me.
Yeah.
It makes the kitchen possible because otherwise there's unsupported steps in the middle.
You do what you have to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, Adelaide introduced me to the opportunity to be a broadcaster with community radio there. And I was also being a film reviewer with their street press, which was a bit of a lark. They had, for a long time, a she said, he said sort of dueling 150-word tiny reviews. So I was the she said,
okay, yes.
and a good friend was the he said. And so when I came back to Melbourne, it was quite possible for me to still be submitting from here.
Right.
And so in the first couple of months back, I got sort of authorised as a reviewer. This 3CR has a very different audience to what many of the traditional reviewers would reach with their bigger sort of proper papers, or, you know, more important radio stations, again in inverted commas about important. But yeah, so, you know, spreading the word doesn't hurt in any way you can. And I'm, you know, all about no waste. So it meant I took some takeaway containers in anticipation of leftovers.
Now, where do you want to have this, Jane? Do you want it in here?
At the table. I'll go back
at
to
the
the
table.
table,
Okay,
I think.
no
But at the moment, I need to put something on my feet. Otherwise, I make my ankles bleed.
Okay. Now, you said graphic design. Where were you studying this?
Swinburne.
Right, so that was straight out of school into Swinburne.
Yeah. Because she, is obviously not eating heaps, but it's something that's, messed her metabolism up so comprehensively. And Sharon, could I get you just to have a go with this strap on the right shoulder? There's a button.
Oh, this one? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No worries.
So see if it can do itself up and tuck in and not undo.
Now, hold on. The button
Is on the inside.
The button, my love, has...
Great. All right.
Mexican Dia del Amor.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Day of the Dead.
Yeah, Day of the Dead, Mexican.
Yeah, that's it. Dia del Amor. Which I think is around May, so coming soon, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. But, yes, there was a thought. The alternative was a black dress with red dots and piping, but then I wore that yesterday and managed to drop some food on the front of it.
Oh, yes, I know that well. Dropping food on things.
So that one went out of the game plan, and this one, as my backup, was
cute.
like, it's nice to be.
It's nice.
And
The eagle has landed.
yes, with no grace whatsoever, but that's my paradigm, and that's what I have to just accept, because there's no harm, there's no point in getting upset with being semi-crippled and struggling, because that's what it is. So
not going to make it better, is it?
no shame. It's just people realise they help, or they just watch and go, glad it's not me. But there's plenty of offers of help, which is always a nice part of things, and it's just validating when people just emerge at your side anytime there's a drama. What can we do? What can we do? And there's also just the support of existing friends and community and stuff, which has been also incredibly validating and touching. And there's emotions, of course, and no one's here forever. The thing that is inescapable with people is mortality, which we deny.
We so do. Yeah.
And so this has forced me to do a bit less denial, a bit more consideration. But I actually consider that a gift, because to have an opportunity to not leave a complete mess, and to consider how maybe you'd like to disperse things you've accumulated, how best to be supportive of those you're going to leave behind, so it's not a complete debacle of no direction, no idea, no assistance in terms of, well, what would we do with this stuff? What would she have wanted? So, yes, I'm having the opportunity to put some structure in place and to actually sort of divest in a meaningful way back to many of the fundraising organisations that I've accumulated things from to help their work. This way they get
a lot of the artwork comes from various fundraisers, and
exactly,
you're going to give those back.
And good causes.
Yeah.
So there's organisations like Arts Projects Australia who have a gallery in Westgarth and Collingwood Yards, stable of international and lesser known artists. They run studios where the artists can create to their own heart's desire, basically. They're a really wonderful, supportive organisation, and you may be aware of Alan Constable. He's represented in New York. He makes ceramic cameras. When you get a chance, that bird up there is artwork of his, the little one with the blue sky.
Okay.
So he's one of their internationally renowned artists, but I've got works from all sorts, lots of ceramics, so we'll show you them later. And then next week some of their art handlers will come and pack those things up so that they can go back, be included in their next group show, be sold again so the artist gets the money again, And I have confidence that these things that I've had in my home that I can love and enjoy will go to someone else's home
It's a
to be
wonderful
loved and
thing.
enjoyed.
Yes. Jane, have you got any of your own work here?
I do, and there's just a few bits around in the front room there, which is dark at the moment, but we can point them out later.
Yeah, I reckon they'd be fun to look at some of what you do.
And I will be able to find some drawings and things that I did when I spent my long lockdown in the hospital. And
yes, I remember that, yes.
it was a great hospital to be in, and they had musicians would come by and, serenade and chat, and the art therapist would come by and leave materials so that I could do things to put up around the room that I was in and personalise it for myself. And so my style is more crafty, colourful, cheerful, random, sort of just because I always have music playing. It means that I've got a flow.
Were you first sick when COVID? You were first diagnosed when COVID
Prior
started?
to that, and then the story for my admission and undertaking was basically I was sitting where I am now, a little bit later in the day, but not much, and just like had this experience of vertigo, blackout vision, sparkle, sparkle, sparkle. Thought that was weird. Is that some side effect of COVID I haven't heard of?
Because you had just had COVID.
No, never had COVID, but was aware of it. It was out there. And so I had just this, out of the blue blackness. And I looked up online and I could see that locally there was a COVID testing station not too far away. So I said to Mark, who is here, I'm just going out, this happened. I'm going to see if it's something to do with COVID. I'll be back in a couple of hours, going down the street. So I walked off, went left where I should have gone right, inquired somewhere down the street, discovered that it was only a drive-through COVID testing station, so it wasn't going to work anyway. Discovered a new medical centre across the road from the most unhelpful pathology people who basically went, get out of here. The new medical centre people were lovely, and they took some details. They said, prior to this I had surgery to have a mass removed along with my last remaining ovary, so because I never thought I was going to be a mother, so they were superfluous to me anyway. And I'd had one out by keyhole, and then the second one some years later, which was, a cautionary tale. If you're feeling any pain or whatever, get things checked. And so I had the second one out, which required a bigger cut because there was a mass attached. The mass got sent to Peter Mac, so it's had its moments with students and investigations and things. Subsequent to that, I had a little bit of connection to a hospital up at Heidelberg, which until you need to go somewhere like that, because I'd spent my life going from home to the city, had no idea that I was very proximate to a very large medical centre. And so the first referral that was sent off was refused, which is quite daunting when you're feeling unwell and vulnerable. But basically they said you're in the wrong catchment area, so it was a matter of approaching the right people, who then took me under their wing. And so with that connection as a basis, the Fairfield Medical Centre called up the Ambos for me to let them take me into Heidelberg to investigate what was going on. And it meant that they looked after me. I just sat quietly out the back till the Ambos came, all very non-panic, non-drama. But the upshot of it was that I spent the night in an old ward of the Austin and woke up feeling like I was in like one floor over the cuckoo's nest, because when I say old ward, it literally was one of those pale green ones. I was the only person in like a quite large room of old iron style beds. I mean, it feels like I hallucinated it, but I don't think I did. But anyways, the upshot was good news, bad news. No, you don't have COVID, But you do have acute myeloid leukemia.
Right, yes.
Possibly. I'm losing the narrative because there's been a lot of stages. It was
Ovary.
a complication from the original chemo.
Right.
Dealing with the original lymphoma.
Okay.
So they deal with the lymphoma,
Yeah.
you get chemo. As a result of the chemo, I ended up with this disease of the blood being acute myeloid leukemia.
Yes.
And so the upshot was that something like months later, after I'll be back in a couple of hours, I came back here. But into good hands, well looked after, just, nuts. And the ultimate thing was at the start of the big efforts with COVID, I was here just with Mark in the house and could go for walks on the local creeks with friends who are in the 5K radius and walks around the block and stuff. And then with a later diagnosis, because we did go through chemo, we did deal with that trajectory. I did get back here. There were lockdowns. And then there was a further diagnosis. And so it was found that I would need further chemo and a proper full stem cell transplant.
Yeah, that's...
So I went from being here with Mark and a handful of people in the neighbourhood to being in the ward at the hospital with doctors, surgeons, nurses, ancillary staff, kitchen staff, other patients, the art therapy people, the music therapy people, the other visitors who passed by. So like hugely social and engaged environment, and incredibly supportive environment, and incredibly well thought out environment in terms of the way the entire building has been created to, it's the Olivia Newton-John Cancer and Wellness Centre. And so it means that wellness in a much more holistic sense is considered. All the rooms have a view out towards the Dandenongs, very expansive, and
beautiful. Yeah.
the nature of being in hospital when I'm there, I always wake up early. I work with the daylight as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because of the way my treatment went, I had a room to myself the bulk of the time.
Because they had you quite isolated in a negative thing,
Had to be,
Negative pressure.
ionisation and stuff,
yeah.
so that it's completely minimising the risk of infection, because they have to
They wipe out your immunity, don't
wipe
they?
out your
before
immunity. They have to
transplant.
empty your bone marrow.
Scary stuff.
There's all these stats that they write up every day of, things that are responding in the way they should to the treatment. And so in all of the world, there's a German woman who we nicknamed Heidi, who sent her stem cells to me, coming through the embargo of lockdown
Amazing.
twice.
Amazing. Yeah.
The second time was a vial about this big, but it was just enough to kind of kickstart things again when it wasn't quite activated enough. It's an incredibly basic process that made me laugh when you do get your stem cell transplant. But so it's a long lead up to it. Then when your bones are completely empty, they give you the stem cells. Then you have to wait for those to kind of repopulate. And the science just blows my mind. It was also repeated to a degree one time when I'd got out in between and done too much, because a friend does a lot of work supporting cancer sort of research and stuff. He does it through the Peter Mac because his elder brother was treated with Peter Mac. And I'd got out and coincidentally got out from the hospital, I say. There was Mal doing a function as part of his fundraising efforts for the Peter Mac, and there was also someone that I'd studied with who died of breast cancer, and there was like a wake and a exhibit of her artwork, and just a chance to go and celebrate Laurie's life as well.
Yeah.
And these two things were in 1 week, and one was in South Yarra and one was in Fitzroy, and I did too much and I got shingles.
Because I remember so vividly you telling me how ghastly it was.
and I got it
All across your head.
up here.
Yeah.
And so I had these spots coming up on a Sunday night. And again, it was the same kind of thing. I took my bicycle to the train, went into Heidelberg just in case the trains had stopped when I thought I was going to come home. Locked it up near the ambulance bay. Went and saw them. Diagnosed with shingles. Something like 10 days later, got discharged.
Was the bicycle still there?
The bicycle was still there.
Whoa,
No
amazing.
parking fines, no
Amazing.
nothing. Just, still there. And so, circling around, my idea of a practical approach to being diagnosed in the first place, to having an issue and having to have, treatment, was to go out and get a small folding electric bicycle rather than the regular bikes that I'd always used up till then. So some people might say when you're diagnosed with cancer, the last thing you're going to do is buy a bike. But I thought, no, I'm going to keep as much as possible how I like to live while I can. And, the technology when I needed it was right there. So I got a bike with pedal assist and an electric motor. And it just meant that I could keep riding. And as a folding bike, it meant if I had an appointment, I could ride it into the hospital, and someone didn't have to drop me off and wait. It just meant I had to let them know when I was ready to pick up, and they'd come and get me and the bike.
Yes.
And it's just the one trip without them hanging around.
Yes.
And so it just meant that I felt less of a drag on my friends and the people who were helping me. And a lovely quote that I heard not long ago from my oncologist was, he's always described me as the Lone Ranger. And I love to embrace that as like, yes, they're recognising that independence is so important to me. And just how, I've always felt it's important from a teenager on. When my parents divorced, it was fundamental as a woman that I was going to stand on my own 2 feet and never have to be dependent on a bloke for any sense of security or anything. I was quite capable of doing that for myself. And so that, by extension, is the way I've approached my treatment and everything that I can manage in terms of sharing and giving and supporting others. And when I need it, getting that back, but not counting on it or not excessively being dependent on anyone. So, that's kind of my ethos. And so there was the e-bike as a possibility, gave me my independence to continue up until only about 5 weeks ago, when I had to acknowledge that my legs currently aren't up to stabilising me. And so stopping and starting was always a constant crisis of confidence. And a risk, and I recognised that if something happened and I fell and rather than skin my knees, if I fractured something, it would really make a mess of my independence. So I had a short admission into the hospital and came out with a borrowed wheelie walker to try, and I've embraced that as the stabilising thing that makes it possible for me to slowly get around. And I just need the
That's all. Go.
cable into
Just wait for this one to finish.
Music Matters on 3CR.
Music does most certainly matter, and here's Jane to bring you 2 hours of the music that really matters to me as I run you through performers that you can see in and around Melbourne in the coming week or so to try and inspire you off the couch, even though it's autumnal, even though the nights are closing in. It's still worth both getting out to see music, getting out to see the International Comedy Festival, which is running up to the 21st of April with shows everywhere you tend to look, I'm sure. And also some great movies that I can recommend that are out now or coming soon, because taking refuge in a cinema is also a nice way to be able to avoid the worst of the weather, perhaps make it an interesting thing to inspire you out and into a refuge rather than feeling a bit vulnerable to storms or whatever Melbourne may throw at us. So very quickly at the start, super recommend Perfect Days, Robot Dreams, Civil War and Origin. They're all not the big blockbusters, but I feel all really worth seeing. Beyond that as well, I'd love to recommend two shows at La Mama that are having short seasons as part of the Comedy Festival. One is a radio play taking place at the Carlton Courthouse, which is particularly appropriate to where I sit now and how the world works for me and my cares. So until the 14th, you can see Corpus Delicti, which is the radio play I referred to, at the Carlton Courthouse from La Mama. And the same dates till the 14th, The Terminator is also on at La Mama HQ. And I did see The Terminator. Trigger warning, if discussions of abortion are not for you, then maybe it's not your play. But look at the lamama.com.au website. Make your choice. Very funny, very smart, very engaging performance. So, as always, really highly recommended in that sense. And naturally enough, also a really big thanks to Bungelini and the extended crew who are here bringing you Black and Deadly. Always was, always will be, and respectfully I acknowledge that I'm broadcasting from stolen land, and I hope Australia will learn to do better sooner rather than later. In respect of First Nations performers and stuff, the wonderful Emily Wurramara has a new track, so we'll begin the music on Music Matters today with her new release, Midnight Blues. So Maddie came and picked me up, which was good, but I think my feet have swollen even more from where they were at, and so it means that I had a really big wrestling act to get my shoes on, which took away our buffer zone of time.
I've had experience with you on the shoes.
Yes, exactly. It's like, you know, moving around on the wheelie walker is an upper body workout, but putting shoes on. Whereas crutches are scary to me.
Yes.
So embracing the wheelie walker has been wonderful. Initially I would use it to walk to the end of the street and catch the bus.
Yeah.
As the weather's got a bit nasty and my legs have got worse and I get more tired and everything's slower, I've been embracing lifts with friends wherever possible. I believe in the Comedy Festival as a restorative sort of bulwark against winter darkness, wetness, cold, whatever it may be. If you can get a bunch of laughs under your belt in March and April, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And
Staves off depression.
exactly. And the way I do it is utilise websites where I can book cheap tickets for the shows that are by smaller artists.
Yes, promo ticks you use a lot, don't you?
A lot,
Yes,
and
you
it's
told me about
fantastic.
that.
And I can just sit here at the table with my diary, look at various things. I like to support women, and so that's a way of filtering through the shows on offer. And the Comedy Festival program, I don't ever actually even try and read it, because with 400 plus shows, it can do your head in, and trying to plan, it becomes very difficult. Whereas with 100 shows on Promotix, and then filtering them down by gender, so it's like, and this one I've seen before, so I can take them out, or filtering by venue, learning the hard way which ones do and don't have good access, so I know which ones to focus on and to avoid.
Yes.
It just makes it easier and also super cheap, which means that I can see 5 shows with a friend for the price of one main act ticket. And by buying 2 tickets for the price of one every time, gives me a better chance of having someone come along and give me a lift home. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's a win-win-win.
Yeah.
That's practical.
It's great. And so things like that, again, have materialised as a consequence of the web, made things so much easier in terms of the way I'm navigating my life through illness and stuff. Things like that are there when I need it. And yeah, so I've been lucky in time.
Was this your first big run-in with illness when all this got diagnosed in your life?
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a shock to be so ill later in life. How do you keep up this positivity? Was this always a feature of your nature to be so positive all your life? Because I'm in awe of it.
I think it's been a reaction. 3 times I've had houses with men involved, and the 3 times they've decided that someone else takes their fancy more. They've gone off me, and the fact that the house is connected means that they can turn around and use it as a power game and make my life a misery, to no actual benefit to them, but they just like their power games.
Got them in.
I was lucky the first one was the least bad, and that was regarding a property we bought back in about 94 in Clifton Hill. And it was a little single-level Victorian terrace that had spent a long time as being the Clifton Hill Poetry Society, which we discovered when we took up the collapsing front veranda and discovered all these candle stubs with little wrappers around them for the Clifton Hill Poetry Society. So we could imagine the candlelit evenings with wine on the porch. So we moved into this wreck of a place, kept the outer shell and the chimneys, and did a complete rebuild from the front back. And using my principles of, you know, slowly learning and picking up ideas about environmentally sound design and how to best create something that would have minimal environmental impact. So extensive double glazing, lots of light everywhere, huge doors for flow through, kept the front 2 rooms and the hallway, and then expanded at the back into like slate floors and kitchen dining and large family room, and then double garage at to the rear access of the lane. When we had a look in the traditional sense, there were 2 rooms and a tiny room and a little sort of alcove that let some light into the tiny room. And when the weatherboards came off, the uprights came down from the top, but you could touch them and they would swing in the breeze with termites eating out the bottom completely. And that was a consequence of somehow the floor within the tiny room was 6 inches lower than the build-up of earth outside. So
Goodness.
it was in quite a state, obviously. It hadn't been lived in for a while, but it was open slather to make it really light-filled and airy. And at the time, I didn't realise that gas was such a troublesome fossil fuel. It was cheap and abundant.
We were all encouraged to use gas, weren't we, back then? Yeah.
Gas was there, so we went with gas until subsequently, I'm proud to say that in the 2 houses that I've owned here, I've had the gas meters abolished completely and made them all electric. This one has solar panels as well, so it generates. Because of overshadowing, that hasn't been an option at Clifton Hill, but it is now all electric, and it's just such a more healthy environment within the house itself without having the gas off-gassing and, you know, taking out the oxygen supply and needing you to have all the random venting that makes it cold in the winter. And to get through that kind of stuff, you have to go, okay, that was terrible, but put it behind you, because you can keep dwelling on things and let it drag you down, or you can go, okay, try and learn from that. I'd just be riding along going, I'm a good person, I do good things. I'm a good person, I do good things. And trying to just fortify myself that with all this stuff being landed on me, and my major problem there was that I'd helped someone buy a house together. 6 weeks later, he decided he didn't want to be a part of it. I found someone to buy it for, a comfortable premium to cover all the effort that we'd put into it. But then when the ex-partner had the contracts drawn up and delivered to the potential buyer, and I turned up at the potential buyer's place to pick up the contracts so I could sign them and I could seal it off and do it, they refused to give me the contracts. And in the meantime, my ex-partner put a case in the Supreme Court to allow the property to be sold with the contracts that they'd refused me access to. Who I was the only person who had done the campaign to find this person to agree that it should be sold at this price. And so all of that just was doing my head in. And I thought, this is obviously a vexatious case. It's wasting the time of the Supreme Court. The courts will see this as stupid. We can set a precedent that other women can't be manipulated and controlled in this way. But 4 years later, I discovered that it's exactly what the court's like. Any court case is a good case to them. The longer it draws out, the more money in their pockets. The more rubbish that is done to someone, they don't care. The best thing that came out of all of that, after I learnt that the justice system is not such a thing, it's a, there's no truth or justice to it. It's a legal system and it's adversarial. So it's not about getting results in any possible good way. It's about drawing it all out and making it as hard as possible, and they don't care about anything but having work. So that was a shocking thing to learn, and I keep it in my mind now as my current tenant thinks that he's got a bite at this one because he's lived here so long. And it's like, lawyers aren't going to help you. They'll tell you that you've got a case, but it's only to, get their next car or pull. I'm willing to negotiate. Mediation is the obvious thing to start with. Talk to me about it. It's just like nothing about the legal system is going to help anyone but the legal system.
Yeah.
So that's a current thing that I need like a hole in the head, obviously. But, we'll try and see where we can get to with that. But the upshot of the dramas and the, 4 extra years I had to spend as a hostage in South Australia was that I made a claim against my lawyer for excessive charging. Cost me $1,000 to make the claim. The investigation said, yeah, he's overcharged you. Kind of, so what? No penalty to him. No help to me. And so in this small courtroom with that, I just said to this bloke, the judge, I hope you rot in hell. And he actually died a year or 2 later.
Oh, put the curse on him.
Great. And I heard recently that the situation with judges, the longer they've worked, they get, like 5% of their excessive money that they got in advance when they retire every year, and they get this and they get that and the other. So that I figure by him dying within 2 years of retiring, I've actually saved the taxpayer a very substantial amount of money, which covers the well-warranted DSP that I've been on, the disability support pension, because I had a very valid claim of depression, anxiety, just the
This was back then in
PTSD.
South
This is a long time ago, yeah. And I've had that ever since as a backup, and I don't feel unjustified with that, because the experience of being forced into the Supreme Court and denied the fact that I had created the opportunity for this to be resolved, and physically and nuts, the judge said, oh, it's quite okay for them not to give you access to sign the papers. Who knows what you might have done with them?
Gee.
Like,
Awful.
outrageous, but, the patriarchy.
Yeah.
So the patriarchy is still a problem. And
yet some people, it makes them really bitter, but for you, it seems to have led you in a different direction. Of
Exactly,
being
you know,
very
because there's always
positive.
there's the fundamental thing that there's a few things that you pick up along the way, the kind of the quotes or the things that these days pop up as affirmations or whatever, and one of them is, revenge is a dish best served cold. That's one thing that you can do, but it doesn't do anything actual, and it's risky and it's just not helpful. So rather than that, it's like, meh, move on. And so once I've put like these terrible learning experiences behind me, I don't want to keep them. It's not serving me. I want to look beyond myself. And so that's where I go into the community. I go back to being validated by creativity, music, art, being inspired by people who are doing things from the wellspring that I consider the most sustainable and most fabulous resource we have, which is creativity. It's unbounded. It doesn't require any explosions, any, mining, any exploitation. It just comes from within, and it's such a one-way positivity street. So that is the foundation that I draw on, that it's just like, we'll go back to that, we'll celebrate that. That gives me heart and stops me from being a complete misanthrope. And that's what I go back to.
Yeah.
That creativity, not being a misanthrope, we can build from that. And the more you celebrate people's creativity and just take joy from your surroundings, the better it is. It's one of the positive feedback loops or a negative feedback loop. And when you're in a positive one, it's so helpful and so much easier. And so fundamentally, to simplify my life, I just want to set things up so I don't have to worry about stuff. And then I am free to volunteer. I am free to feel supported and engaged and is doing something valuable that gives back to the younger generation, because I feel like I have had such a cruisy time of it, through quirks and luck and things turning up when, maybe I manifest them, maybe it's karma, maybe it's luck, maybe it's just...
I think you create your own luck, really.
To a degree.
You put yourself in the right environment, you do the right stuff, luck comes your way.
Exactly. And, whether it's that or whether it's just circumstance, I don't even care to analyse.
Doesn't matter, that's right.
It's the same thing with illness. I could have spent a lot of time going, why? It wouldn't change the fact that I'm ill.
Yeah, right.
And so, rather than give myself those distractions, which are fundamentally pointless, it's like I live my life with radio as a constant companion. And so when I was in the hospital, there were voices that I knew, people I knew who were there either directly in my ears if I was in a ward, or just in my room if I had a private room. And for much of it, because of my immunocompromised state, I had a private room. So I could just have the radio on 24/7. It's what I do. It's company, it's information, it's feeling connected. And the major part of successfully navigating months on end in the hospital was that outside was a months on end lockdown. So for all of that, there was zero FOMO.
Yes.
Which otherwise is a big issue to me.
Oh, yes, I would figure that. Jane, when you left your studies at Swinburne, did you work in the area of graphic art?
I did, but there were two choices back then, and we are talking the 80s and 90s, which is, the greed is good time, and it was pre-computerisation.
Gordon Gecko.
And it meant that there was a lot of money doing graphic design because marketing was really important to feeding the consumption. Greed is good. So what I decided, rather than working my way up to a position in a big agency, which means that I'm a creative director eventually, I'm making good money, Not interested really, because while I like design and I like art, I'm not a big one for the marketing and the selling.
Yeah.
And so it was like, that's an accidental conflict I've popped myself into. So within that, it was like, what I'm going to do is just be basic, work freelance. Every hour I work, I get paid for.
Yeah.
And so the basic thing at that time was, if you were aiming to work for a big agency, you'd get paid a 40-hour week and you'd work an 80-hour week.
Yeah.
And that was the expectation. Whereas for me, if I worked a 35-hour week and got paid 35 hours at a freelance rate, excellent.
Yeah.
And so I've never been one to spend much money on living. I've always found ways to go to shows that are free, or, never been a big drinker when I'm out. That saves me lots of money. There's lots of aspects where my mum demonstrated, because she was the youngest child in a big family and Second World War, and, she understood environmentalism and frugal living and, not wasting things way before it was ever anything popular in the zeitgeist. And so I had her as a wonderful role model of, you don't just consume without thinking about things. And so I'd never done that. I worked through my late teens at various jobs, and the main one, which gave me a couple of great friendships, was when regional shopping centres were starting to be built, and Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday morning shopping was a new thing. And so I worked at a dry cleaners. So consequently, after a childhood of being the girl in the family and cooking the Sunday roast and doing the ironing for the family, I haven't ironed since working at the dry cleaners.
Yay.
And so, there's those kind of freedoms and flexibilities that kind of just came by the by.
Yeah.
But, it was really interesting to have access to having your clothes dry cleaned, so I stopped having to do quite so much laundry and stuff as well. And, earning some money. So
What shopping centre was that at?
it was Knox City.
Knox.
So I grew out in the Blackburn, Heathmont, Bayswater, Blackburn
out
Lake
east.
Primary, Bayswater High School.
Oh, Blackburn Lake's nice. It's a nice little lake.
It is lovely. That was where my grandparents lived, and my mum grew up, and, as a family we spent a while in her parents' family home. There's all these disjointed stories that we'll tell, and editing's going to be a nightmare, I'm sure.
But that so surprises me that you grew up in the outer east and you're living such a sort of bohemian life in the northern suburbs now.
Yes, well,
one often stays where one grows up. I stayed sort of southeast where I grew up. It's another country coming north of the river for me.
I understand. I very seldom go south. I used to go south a lot because St Kilda was the live music hub.
Ah, yeah. Not anymore, though. This is the hub. There's so little live music south, which is a grief to me because...
PBS used to be down south.
Was it?
Yeah, and now they're all north, which is, again, things land in my lap.
Hi, Jane, and thanks so much for the opportunity to let you know what a good friend you've been over the years. As a fellow film reviewer, you've always been there, and you've been wonderful by showing us things and imparting your really interesting knowledge and pretty concise views after when we have a little chat about the films, and you've been quite good about that. You've even helped me a few times when I haven't quite understood what's been going on, and you give me a bit of perspective, and I thank you very much for that. You've always been very environmental conscious also by riding your bike down to all of those films and all the previews and other things, I'm sure, and all that riding has kept you very fit over the years, I'm sure, and doing the exercise as well. So that's been really good. Occasionally you get there a bit late, and I've got to remember that I like to help you out by telling you what happens at the very beginning of the film afterwards, and it's quite, I've been appreciative to help you with that. So we love you very much, Jane, and thanks very much, and it's been really good knowing you over these years. Thank you.
My father was an engineer running a business. My mum worked in the business. It involved Riley Cars and performance engineering and performance finishing for products and things. And there was my dad and my mum working there, ancillary other blokes, and a man named Ian Ruffley, who was also involved with Riley's, which was a sort of a draw card. They were a post-war vintage car out. Well, not vintage at the time, obviously, but now they are. Post-war car coming out of England.
Yes.
From Coventry.
Yep.
And they were the cars that my father Ron liked. They were the cars that Ian liked. And so blokes who liked cars would turn up at my dad's factory and get to know him and then come to work with him. Ian worked with him. Ultimately, my parents divorced, and Ian and my mother Betty bought a house in Bayswater, and so they'd been together in that house for over 5 decades.
Oh, wow. Okay. So she didn't stay long with your dad. That was sort of 10, 15 years maybe?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so she got married quite young, had 3 children in very quick succession. So there's the oldest brother, the youngest brother, and me, not just the middle child. I was the only girl.
Right.
So in the sense of positivity, that's a little example as well. I could have been just, I'm in the middle. I'm the only girl.
Yeah.
So, you claim your space, and it's about how you frame things.
Yes.
And so there was 3 little kids to deal with. Mum was working as the bookkeeper. My dad had the business. He used to drive and race minis. So for a long time we had Cooper S's as the family car, and you can imagine us as 3 children fitting across the back of a mini.
Yes.
But, as children you do fit.
Yeah.
Then eventually as teenagers they did divorce after, separation, try again, the usual sort of thing. But again, through timing and luck, for them it was possible to divorce. Not that they were religious, that wasn't the restriction, but legally they could. Then Mum and Ian lived together as de facto. They didn't need to get married. That was, just fine by them. No issue to us. They bought this house in Bayswater, which at the time was transitioning from being orchards.
Oh.
But anyways, over time, that property was completely transformed, and by the time I was 21, maybe 7 years later or whatever, we had a dry-clad pool with a decking around it. So the 21st birthday party involved a lot of people going headfirst into the pool.
Your 21st.
Yes, the trajectory there was that I'd gone to Swinburne, and I spent a year on the train going from Bayswater to Glenferrie. Got jack of that. Spent a year driving the Mini that was gifted to me for my 18th birthday. Right. Decided that was too hard as well. So for my 3rd year, I moved next door to a place above and behind a milk bar on 646 Glenferrie Road. And I'd gone to the student housing. Yeah. I'd seen this little sign. I went to check it out. The fella who was running the milk bar was newly installed and focused on the milk bar. He said, look, if you want to take it, this is the deal. The garden, I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to do much with the garden. And I said, oh, that's fine. I like gardening. I'm happy to look after that. So he said, oh, well, I'll knock some money off the price. So we were literally next door to college, had this place, above and behind a milk bar, share house, about 4 of us in it. Cost us $12.50 a week for rent.
They were the days.
Naturally enough, we became the party house for 3rd year for college. Also, I was, like the last person to arrive, even though I was the closest to the joint. So we had sensational parties. We had such a lovely time in 3rd year. myself, my partner, and one of the other tenants, co-sharers, all had minis. 3 of them fit in the backyard.
Oh, what fun.
For off-street parking. And we used to joke that they'd breed, but they never quite managed it. But it was a great place, and so it was the start of community, it was the start of celebration, it was the start of building social aspects as well as, you know, consolidating graphic design, which was a great thing to study. And so by that trajectory, I stopped and paused at one point and thought, oh, that's great. I've moved close to college, but I've also accidentally moved out of home with no drama.
Yeah.
So it's how, you know, it's how you frame things.
Yes, yes.
And my mum might have felt a bit of a sense of stress, but she didn't let on. And I'd accidentally left home and not even considered it as part of what I was doing. So rites of passage.
Do you think your mother felt abandoned a bit?
Maybe. But she didn't let on.
Mothers do, but that's nice that she
My
didn't let
mother
on.
still wants to mother me, even now. Always when I ring up, it's like, hi Mum, it's Jane, and she'll go, and how's Jane? And I'm so sorry you're going through this, and how are you? And it's like, you're the one I care about. I want to talk about you. You know, I'm in good hands. Don't worry about me. But as a mother, that's her role. That's what she does.
That's what mothers do. Yes.
Exactly, and I accept that, but I really don't want her worrying about me, but she will. And
You have to permit her
it.
to. You have to
I
permit
know.
her to, because, yeah, it's her role.
And so, yes,
And
she
wants
was
to
probably a
comfort
bit,
you, yeah.
probably a bit stressed that I'd moved out, but I'd done it accidentally without a thought.
Very
So,
smart.
oops, but handy. And that's how I stay positive as well. You know, these things happen on a different kind of thought plane. So I'm not considering the angsty side of it. I see the positive and I focus and I act in that. And then, you know, it's like, avoid the angst. That's good.
When you were at college, is that when you started? When did you get your first interest in all your social issues that you're so involved in? Because you probably involved in more things than one can shake a stick at, as far as I can gather.
When did the Greens actually start as a movement?
I joined them when I was in Adelaide because you had to join them to volunteer. And it was like, I just thought I'd like to help them because I'm quite jack of our politics and the vested interests and stuff. And so again, that was like, I'd like to come and volunteer. Well, you have to be a member. Okay, I'll sign up. Didn't cost much. Oh, I'm political.
Is that the organisation you say your most passion is about, or equally distributed?
No.
What
Community radio, most passionate about. Environmental, very passionate about. Artistic and supporting creative endeavour, and also those who are marginalised, very passionate. So it's
Women's
broad.
rights.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, big.
Completely. And it's also a consequence simply of when I grew up. So student unions were big and fabulous when I studied.
Yeah.
And so that was a critical part of what was important in the social life at uni. So that was very grounding. But as a function of when I grew up and started to realise about things, we had the Vietnam War rallies. That was very important.
Yeah.
We had the risk of mutually assured destruction by nuclear annihilation.
Yep.
That was very important. We had the population explosion bomb concept, very important. Rachel Carson had written a book 10 years
Spring.
before I was in
Yeah.
Silent Spring.
Yeah, Silent Spring.
Before I was even born, but there was that recognition of the damage we were doing to the environment. So it was a combination of what was happening and what was being protested against. You know, Geraldine Greer had sort of popped out and people were going, patriarchy, feminism,
Yeah.
oh, should women have rights? What a concept. But yes, so it was a matter of timing and awareness. So as I grew up, Vietnam War rallies, not that I went with my family, like, you know, you see in documentaries of the time and children growing up with activist parents. My mum wasn't doing that and she was out in Bayswater, but having moved into the city, I had access to these things. As a student, I had awareness of these things. And it was the time where population was such an issue that I went and asked the local doctor one time when I was there with my mum if I could be sterilised as a teenager.
Oh, really?
And he refused, but, you know, subsequently I have been proved that that was my decision and I stuck by it. I never had children. I didn't feel like the world needed me to have children. And eventually my younger brother married a woman who had 2 kids already and had 2 of his own. So they're my nominee kids or my quota or something.
Yes, they've taken your quota of 2.2 or whatever it was.
Exactly. But I never felt the world needed my children, and so that wasn't an issue to me, which has simplified my life, of course. So, you know, I make these decisions and stand by them and don't have to angst about anything, which is a really helpful way to be able to stay positive, I feel. So that was a decision. I'm not having kids, but I am going to care about the environment. I am going to care about what other people bequeath to their kids. I am going to try and live by my values and set the right example, whether people care or not. It's for me, basically, that if I do no harm, then that's important to how I feel about myself. Ideally, I make it better, but at the very least, if I do no harm, that's fine. And so it was all tied together, the wars, the weaponry, the shameful loss of life, waste at any level, exploitation at any level, unfairness at any level. It all rubbed me the wrong way. But there was also, Whitlam came in a bit before I needed him, but he was there to set these things in place. And so there became free tertiary education as a possibility. Medicare existed. You know, there were just these fundamental things that came into action when I needed them. Because my parents had divorced, I could qualify for scholarships for my schooling, which made a difference, being a low-income family, which, of course, as a kid, you exist in the paradigm that you exist in. You don't know that you're deprived in any way until one time in, like, maybe Form 4 or something, I got to go to a place called Lord Somers Camp, which is down the peninsula, for a school camp. And later I realised that you only qualified to go there if your family was such that they couldn't take you on a proper holiday.
Ah, right, yeah.
And so, you know, it's like realising retrospectively that the way we grew up was not flash, but it never mattered at the time, because you accept, you know, what is offered, you accept the way things are, you pitch in, you do what you can.
Yeah.
And so family holidays, as I mentioned in the eulogy note that I wrote yesterday, often involved 3 kids and a stepdad and mum, with the family old EH wagon pulling a caravan. And because I mentioned that I come from a family of rev heads, we did a hot lap of the Bathurst Mount Panorama circuit in an EJ wagon with a caravan behind. So, you know, laughing all the way and taking it very slowly and slightly overheating on some of the reaches. But we did this hot lap of the circuit with the car and caravan because, you know, that's what rev heads do, to pay homage if they're on holiday in the regions.
Fun.
And, you know, so we covered a lot of ground. My mum was a great navigator and planner. We saw a lot of, you know, the back roads and small places, and just got to explore what's now called country, so to speak, but just to explore the place that we happen to have the luck of living in.
Yes.
And so that was a really good grounding of appreciation of the beauty of Australia and the possibility of taking slow, thick trips and, you know, just enjoying beaches and what have you like that. Family time together, in spite of the bickering on the road trips and all that kind of stuff that siblings do. Meltdowns, not wanting to go on holiday because my boyfriend's become more important, and then going on holiday anyway and going, well, okay, let's have fun. Isn't the beach
Seeing
great?
the positive again. Seeing the positive again.
And The house is a complete sort of shambles of disorganisation because I'm always thinking that I'll get around to something. I'm always, as a cyclist, collecting or rescuing things from nature strips with a view to it could get ruined and damaged here. It's, no one else has taken it. Hopefully it will be useful, but I struggle to organise enough to let people know or them to let me know. Even though I try to say, don't go to the shops, just tell me what you want because I'm sure I can help. I am an accumulator.
Accumulator.
Yeah.
You can still get in the front door, so she's not an official hoarder yet.
I have accumulated a lot of stuff,
A lot of stuff.
And this is a house of two people's household as well, which compounds the issue.
How many years has Mark been? I
Here,
mean, this is not
the entire time,
14 years.
14.
Okay, so you bought it together.
No, I bought it and he paid the world's biggest bond.
Jane, what are the steroids for? What aspect of the medication do they have
The
steroids?
current thing I was treated for, which is different to everything with the stem cell transplant, that is all blood and bone. The spinal cord is a different subsection of your body. Okay. And within my spinal cord, which is, from your sacrum to your head and your brain, very important.
Just a bit.
Just a bit. I had a lesion down low.
Yes, you mentioned that. It was pressing on all the nerves.
And it had expanded within the spinal column to put pressure on the nerves. They don't know a lot about and can't control what happens to the nerves once they leave the spine, which means that the pressure and the damage on the functionality in my legs hasn't really improved, even though targeted radiation has meant that they've dissipated the lesion.
Is it a malignant lesion?
It's
Or they don't know?
leukemia.
Okay, so it's
Lurking
a tumour.
leukemia.
What they call a tumour.
They call it a lesion.
A lesion, not a tumour. Okay.
It's just jargon. It doesn't matter.
yeah.
We can call it whatever we like.
It's not good,
It had
whatever they call
expanded
it,
within the spine, put pressure on the nerves. Thus, my legs were being funny. Thus, I complained. Thus, I discovered the lesion. Thus, I had radiation. Thus, I have about 6 tattoos, which are like the tiniest of dots, which are used to line up their positioning.
Yeah, the machine.
But it's just a joke to me that now I've got my tats.
Okay.
Up here I've got my ritual scarification thing, which is a
From a port that they had in, was it?
a Hickman's line.
Right, yes.
So I've got some ritual scarification and I've got my tats. Not really millennial, but things that I managed to go tick tick without even thinking about, because of course my generation tats weren't really a part of it.
No, they
Now
were.
very much they are.
I know. Yeah.
I was thinking the other night, I could have had like a Indigenous flag with the stars like the Southern Cross, but running down in a line. So a few stars, a small one, a bigger one. Maybe that's how I might have had a tat.
You could still do it.
I could, but I probably shouldn't because of all the issues.
Infection and stuff, yeah.
So I think it's just,
Wise.
I'll settle for my little tiny dots of line-up points for the lasers when they put you in the exactly right position to have radiation treatment. So I'd had chemo, stem cell transplant, now I've had radiation. I'm ticking them all off. And again, the people who do the radiation, the nurses, the support staff, everyone, they're lovely. So, it's a terrible thing to go through, but you are supported and cared for in such a way that, that helps so much in so many ways. But yes, so I think I'm at the end of my treatment options. The radiation has dissipated the pressure, but the legs aren't recovering. So I'm kind of stuck with now researching probably little electric scooters that might be able to be used for mobility if I'm just doing PT. And then if I'm going with friends, the super light wheelie walker. And, learning as I go. How am I best going to navigate this? How am I going to keep doing things to the best of my ability, to the best of, the least sort of difficulty? So every day is learning. every day is recalibrating, every day is, at the last month or so, finding limits by exceeding them. I'm trying to stop doing that and just recognise limits that sit ahead of me. But yes, there's been a few tumbles and a few rescues, and I've been lucky with everything that so far I don't think I've broken any bones. I may have done a little fracture here because there's a painful lump from a couple of days ago. Things like that. Things like all these bruises.
Is that from falling? Or
This, I
crashing
think, was a
into things?
bump.
The bruises. Are they
The
from
bruises have
crashing into
been
things?
from pressure here, so I can't wear the bangles I used to.
Oh, that they will cause a bruise that much.
Anything. And like this yesterday, I caught this bangle on something and pulled it up and took shards, layers of skin off.
Oh, okay.
Everything
Yeah.
happens, stops me in my tracks, takes a long time. But basically, if I wear bangles and a bag strap or something catches on it, I'll have all these bruises. So yesterday I took my bangle collection of silver, which was quite substantial and used to be like a hallmark of me jingling everywhere I went.
I remember that.
Annoying people at the movies. I'd try and pull them down and put my sleeves over them and make them silent. And then if it was a tense movie and I moved, I'd go, stop it. So I had lots of silver bangles. And yesterday, going to the funeral, knowing I'd see my nieces, I said, these are for you to share.
How lovely.
And, you know, kind of get the sense that while I've been a very absent arty because I was overseas when they were born, never saw them till they were small children. Their mum had given them a lifelong aversion to vegetables. I couldn't relate to them. You know, what can I do? So we've never been close, and they've got very different values. Well, the younger one definitely to me because she went into the police force.
Okay.
Following the steps of her stepbrothers. The older one has taken a bit more of a leaf out of my book, I'm pleased to say. So she's a world traveller and she's bought somewhere to live that is her own space. Death can be sad, but as an older person, I don't think it's sad, particularly if there's pain. And I feel my stepdad died in the best possible way, being that apparently just, you know, around 9 a.m. he died peacefully in his sleep. Organ failure, worn out, too much struggle, but you know, more than 5 decades together.
Yeah, it's a bloody long time.
It is. And so, you know, there's like, I always felt in terms of divorce, it's much better to have 2 separate happy parents than conflict under the roof. That's function of patriarchy, that people don't like independent women, they don't like women who don't need them, and so that's just been a backdrop to the way I get responded to by blokes quite often. And you know, it's a drag, and so I find stepping away from that shit and living with people who respect my values much better. So that's what I've done. And, you know, I'm distracted again from the narrative. But basically, the idea is that, you know, I focus on the positive because I don't want to waste time on being run down by people. It's their business. It's their way to see it. I can't change them. But I don't have to drown in it either. I try and, like, distance myself from it. Even though it hurts every time it comes up. And I know it's not true, it still hurts. So, you know, not trying to be exposed to it, that's a good thing.
Now, I noticed that you're taking a few tablets there. Are you taking a cocktail of stuff during the day? And
Not so much during the day. That was possibly a bit late in the day, but there's some that you try and take 12 hours apart.
which ones are those?
That's
This one was
Targin.
Targin, which is a slow-release oxycodone naxolone thing, which is a...
Painkiller, basically.
It's a painkiller and it's slow release. So through the day, that's to try and cover any pain.
Oxycodone usually trips you out a bit.
Exactly, but this is a slow release and not a high dosage. I do have some OxyContin as a backup, which is like the more instantaneous, and I don't use that. I use paracetamol instead. So
where does the pain attack you when you get it? Is it
whole
body or lower
down
spine?
here in the back of my pelvis is my early morning. So that's the one that says, time you should have taken some paracetamol, or did you remember your Tarjan kind of thing. My pain management's generally very good unless I manage to run out of pills and haven't organised my scripts correctly for getting them refilled and things, and that throws me off a bit. But mostly those and paracetamol see me through the day. The other tablets I take are for like infection control.
Because your system's vulnerable.
Yeah, digestion to stop reflux. So first thing in the morning I'll take a tablet and then eat half an hour after that. So that one is a chance to sort of try to diminish reflux and things, which is part of what can mess with just comfort, basically.
Totally. Yeah.
Other things are for diminished infection protection. Other things are maybe fungal. And there's the morning and night ones, which I'll probably be on forever as a result of the shingles as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And so they're a different pain kind of thing. That's pregabalin or Lyrica.
Oh yes.
And so that they're the ones that I'm on distinct from the cancer. They're the shingles. The other ones have, like, I've gone from like tablets sometimes that were that long, like submarines. Sometimes when I was in the hospital, there was a particular tablet that I just couldn't swallow, but they had a liquid option for it, thankfully. You know, it's weird. And through everything, there were 2 days when I had some kind of rabbit-based concoction that related to the stem cells, and it was kind of a triggering thing to activate them. So there were 2 days when I felt like the cure was worse than the disease could ever have been. And out of, 5 years of treatment, that's not a bad average. I've been on situations where I'm being fed from a bag because I couldn't eat. There's been, some pretty very random and different and, uncomfortable but always cared for scenarios that they work through. And I just trust them. I've never bothered with Dr. Google.
So what, Jane, tell us about this. It says 3CR Radio Awards for most outlandish programming. How did that come about?
Hold on, I can't see it. Yeah.
And you were stuck in the hospital, but you still managed to put your radio show together. Hence you got this amazing, wonderful award.
Yes.
How did you physically engineer this show stuck in a hospital ward with 4 other people?
Well, 3CR lent me a full desktop computer system with a very good microphone and Cool Edit on the desktop, which is a program that allows you to put together big files and deal with the music files and things. So anytime when I was in my own room, it was fairly straightforward, but there were a couple of shows where I was in a 4-bed ward. And luckily, I always woke up early. And so when it came to doing the vocal parts of back announcing and forward announcing the tracks and talking about what I was playing, I'd already done the track list and had like a file where the music was there and I knew what tracks I was talking about. So I had a very big cardboard box that the computer came in with. I'd take my pillows, I'd take towels, I'd do everything possible to sort of soften the sound and baffle it. And all of that I would wheel on one of those little tables that they use in the hospital. So I'd wheel that into the bathroom/shower room and do a little takeover there, sitting in front of this box of baffled stuff with the microphone in it and my list of all the tracks, and I just read out. So I began that bracket with, and then a pause. So I began that bracket with and read out the 3 tracks because that's the way I like it. That's the limit of my memory. So I hope that by playing 3 tracks at a time, people can identify what I'm talking about and it's not just a bit too confusing. So I would then record little separate bursts of all these introductory and explanatory information about the music I'd played. And then I could wheel it all out of the shower and go and put it all together and put it in place and then send it by a program called WeTransfer.
Oh, yes.
And then the people at the station would just slot it in when it needed to play. And so that was sort of the most outlandish thing of having to sit in a shower with a cardboard box and a microphone and to navigate the sounds of the hospital or block out, more importantly, kind of thing, and not to interrupt the poor other people who were sharing the ward with me. And so I didn't miss any of my fortnightly shows through all of that time. And it was just a real lovely thing to have a purpose and to, you know, when you're there with time on your hands, really nice way. And normally I structure the show as a gig guide. So it's chronological, based on playing music people can go and see on Friday, music people see on Saturday, just progress like that, trying to make it logical, sensible, easy to put into place in their mind and hopefully be inspired to get out and see a show. But through lockdown, it was amazing how many of the people in the creative industries were still being able to work together remotely. You know, Zoom became a thing. All this sort of music was still coming out. So there was never any shortage of stuff to fill 2 hours a fortnight. And it was just that little bit easier because it wasn't related to a gig guide anymore. There were no gigs. I was stuck in there, zero FOMO. That was good for my headspace. And I was able to just play music that I liked. So it was even easier in a sense that it was just like indulging myself, researching new tracks, putting it together, enjoying doing it without the regular parameters of researching the gigs. So really just an ongoing opportunity to be supportive, to be enjoying music, which is critical to my life.
Are you a musician yourself? Have you got
No.
no musical background, no instruments
I went
learned?
to a regular school that didn't afford a music teacher.
Right.
Music classes were private study, which often involved watching the boys climb out the windows and run away for a smoke. You know, it was just, that was the time and place kind of thing. So I did have a recorder. By the time I tried to learn guitar, it was too much of a struggle to cut my fingernails. That was a bridge too far, and tuning wasn't something that I ever conquered, and it was before electronic tuners. So I never became a musician, thus I never judge music from any technical aspect. I know what I like.
What do you like? What's your favourite genres?
Folky, indie, guitar-based, female component. You know, it's not all about testosterone, it's not all about rock, it's certainly not about auto-tune and pop princesses. The people who are involved in community radio are very often musicians. It's about, you know, genuine songwriting and lack of pretense and enjoyment of the coming together as a band. You know, vicariously, I love all of that kind of incredible capacity that I see on stages. And I feel that someone who's taken the trouble to learn how to play and is doing it and putting themselves up there, I have a role to play as being good audience. I love the intensity of what I'm getting from the stage. I love the beat and I'll dance. You know, I can't be there in audience and not move. And so I'm very open as an audience member of actually reacting. And people have told me from, you know, who've been on the stage, they've told me after, I don't know if you noticed, but I focused on you because you're obviously loving it so much and it really helped me. And it's like, ace, you know, that's great. But it's not forced. It's just the way I choose to respond to something that gives me great joy. A few weeks ago, I saw my oncologist and he said before I left, I'm going to write you a referral for palliative care for 4 or 5 weeks. And I interpreted that as meaning that the trajectory with the nerve issues and the neuropathy and the issues that are in my hands, as well as my legs, meant that there's going to be in 4 or 5 weeks a point where I'm just not able to look after myself well enough, safe enough, and I would be admitted to level 8 at ONJ, which I understood was the palliative care ward, and it was kind of a one-way street. On Monday, I discovered that that was a total misinterpretation. Level 8 is not a one-way street. It's not a long-term stop.
Okay, great.
What was more likely what Andrew was talking about is that he's doing a referral, so if anything goes downhill, they've got me on their books for like an acute passage of care, maybe a week, maybe 2, you know. I can be looked after and sorted out and sent home. And now I understand that I've got more time here. I'm not going there. It's a backup kind of emergency thing. And so at this point in time, I'm still continuing now with the other things, the ancillary groups who are in the community who are supporting me. So the doctor on Monday who explained that I'd misunderstood about the palliative care stuff, said I'm going to write a letter to the Melbourne City Mission people who are here in the community, who are an organisation that exists to support people like me, who I've been referred to already and who have been helping me. And the doctor is going to transfer my care plan from the hospital to them. So they'll be my main sort of support, and I will stay here and we will work within that, which is just a total game changer in the sense that I'm not looking at being removed from everyone and simply connecting electronically. I'm still here, for better or worse, for the poor ancillary support people to navigate a very crowded house. But because I'm not doing as much as I used to, rushing around all the time, I have a bit more time and I'm chipping away at organising this. And I discovered the value of a wheelchair when I went to Acme recently and navigated down their lift, and then in the first room sort of looked up and then ended up falling backwards on my bottom away from my wheelie walker, and people were there to help, and the Acme people were there to help, and they did a trade. So they took the wheelie walker to the cloakroom and bought me the Acme wheelchair. And I discovered the joy of just wheeling myself around the exhibition safely in a chair rather than any effort on my upper body that the wheelie walker necessitates. Day by day we figure out things, we embrace different things, it's just slow progress. So aspects of that are sitting in the front room at the moment as like an obstacle course, but ultimately possibly as a useful thing, because we turned this place from like a very grassy, no garden place into a jungle over the time we've been here. And naturally enough, having a bird feeder means we've got lots of activity to watch out the back windows and to listen to, and you know, hopefully we're going to end up with a native bee home, or there'll be a certain thing, or you know, different spiders, different places. There's an orb weaver in residence, so when you put the washing out in the morning, you have to say, sorry, spider, when you spin the poor old Hills hoist. But we've got plants everywhere, I'm so happy to say, and it just, I planted too many things, so now the backyard, which would have been great for veggies, is a little too shaded. But it means that also we don't have to worry about living uncomfortably in this house. We've got aircon in the front room that was there when we came, reverse cycle air conditioner here. Sometimes we use it if we really must, but putting solar panels on the long north-facing roof, which is 2 systems, that is the total of 5 kilowatts, which was all we could do at the time. That was like the limitation for personal systems. Means that you've got a surface this far away from the roof. So while this bit's generating power, it's also shading the roof and stopping the roof cavity heating up. It meant that we could then get a slimline water tank into the backyard.
Okay.
So that's plumbed to the toilet. So there's very seldom in the year where we actually use mains water to flush the toilet, which is, you know, a great thing. We've got the solar panel generating. I got the gas completely removed and went all electric. I insulated the roof, which hadn't had any insulation in it. So it means with all of that, and also the trees that are grown up in the backyard for privacy and for stopping the summer western sun just heating the back of the house and turning it into an oven, we really have a very comfortable environment without running anything. It just is nice. And in the evenings we can open up the house, and because of the garden, the air's coming in is cool and fresh, and we're protected from looking at the road even, because there's just greenery out the front window. There's greenery out the side. So
Greenery in the bathroom.
exactly, in spite of being in a very sort of close proximity to an industrial zone and close proximity to neighbours, it's a very private space.
Yes.
From what, when we first came, the backyard was like a fishbowl because the houses at the back are higher, and so they just overlooked directly into this expanse of open space that was just like, that's not very comfortable.
Bit invasive.
Yeah, and now they don't have the view. We have our own environment. It's not an issue. It's cool. It's not exposed. And the Hills hoist, which was the main feature of the backyard when we arrived, now is surrounded by berry vines up to a height of about here, so you can't hang the long things in the centre. It's got hanging baskets off it in the centre anyway. It's the orb weaver's home, but you can still use the outer edges, so we can still use the hoist, but it is certainly not the focal point of the backyard anymore. But, you know, I love a good hoist because that's the great way to dry your laundry with the minimum energy requirements or anything of the sort. It comes back to when the physio came, who's part of the ancillary team from Melbourne City Mission. And one thing she said that was a really important point and very simple and fundamental is that people with mobility issues in a toilet with an inward opening door, if you have something happen and collapse against the door, it's very difficult for people to come and help you. Functional, fundamental, simple point. And so she suggested if you can put a curtain up, don't close the door. And so only thing I had to do was go into the room across the hallway and find a curtain. Coincidentally had come from a nature strip and been sitting there for a while. I think unused, but you know, one of those big eyelet kind of curtains in a brown which matches the architraves and things. So I had a curtain, and then I went out the front and I found a sort of push-in kind of curtain rail, which I'd rescued from another nature strip at another time. And so I just measured that and cut about this much off it, and then it was able to push into place, thread this curtain across it, use a step ladder, pop it up after removing a couple of bits of art and repositioning them, of course. And so I have my curtain that fits in quite well, and that's two things I didn't have to look for that were just here accumulated, waiting their moment. So it doesn't validate the entire house full of stuff, but it does show that there's an aspect at which it was the right thing to do. Because when I eat or talk, my mouth just waters, so it's a drag. So I've got to keep doing this. Yeah. Mentally, it's no shock. None of it's a shock because, you know, we grow up in a toxic environment. Illness happens. The surprise is that I've, you know, lasted this long.
Yeah.
in the naivety of youth, when I first started going overseas in my 20s, I had a concern that something might happen to my parents, my aged parents, while I was away. Mortality is something I've always acknowledged. Religion, afterlife, any kind of guilt, resurrection, judgment, never part of my consideration. I've always lived as if I'll go hard when I'm alive and I'll rest when I'm dead. And in that sense, it will be a kind of a welcome break. So it's not something to be frightened of. I just think of it as like, yep, that's it, done. You know, end of spirit, end of consciousness, rest. Phew. Basically. And so, the idea of dying doesn't scare me. The idea of living badly I see as like a sad waste. So I focus on living well, packing as much in as I can, enjoying as much as I can, and going, that was great, thank you.
And not being too much of a burden on people around you. Yeah.
Completely. And so with the illness and having a sense of time frame, I don't see that as oppressive. I see that as a bit of a gift of the chance to think nicely, to be kind, to do stuff with your stuff. That means that it's a much better function, a much better way of moving it on in the world, with people knowing that it's a gift with love, to try and sort of keep a sense of appreciation, kindness, sharing, respect, gratitude, all these good things that can come with gifting and demonstrating care and love. I think now is the time to do that. And I've got that opportunity. I almost didn't have it, and that also sharpened my thoughts, because a couple of months ago I was here on a Saturday morning and I was feeling kind of rubbish, and I stayed in bed all day. And by the time I got up in the evening and sat across from Mark, he said, "You look terrible." And I said, "I don't feel good." And so we agreed that we'd ring the ambulance. And they came on Saturday night, and I recollect them arriving. And then the next thing I recollect was being in the ward at ONJ. And subsequently I found out that on Saturday night I'd gone to emergency. I'd gone transferred into intensive care. I'd transferred to ONJ. And when I came good, it was Wednesday morning. I've got no recollection of it. You know, I might as well have been in a coma. No stress to me, no angst to me, but obviously horrifying. No, I can't fix the world. I can do no harm. I can try and do good. That's what I've done.
Yeah, okay.
It's not on my shoulders to fix the world. I've done all I can. I try to set a good example. I try to do no harm. Can't fix it. You know, like the Gina Rineharts have too much power. Money, greed, not understanding what enough means, I think is a fundamental problem of society.
Totally
I
agree.
very early understood what enough was. I worked within that. It made my life very simple. It allowed me to do things I love to do. I would love to do justice to all the art, but I physically, short of hanging things on the roof, I can't do more than I have. And that's part of why at the moment it's important that now that I've discovered with my newfound understanding of what the palliative care thing means, and I'm not necessarily going to be out of the house as fast as I thought, I'm still going to continue by gifting back works to the good cause organisations I got them from, because then I will free up some space on the walls to maybe give these other things a chance, briefly or for the longer term, we don't know. And so, you know, I think public education is really important. It's the foundation. It's what I was lucky enough to get somehow a broad understanding of fairness and equity somehow got into my head. I wasn't brought up with privilege. I don't feel rights and expectations, and I appreciate what's important for everyone is really important. And I can relay a story that happened one time when I was in the UK. and there was a bloke who just decided to break off a newly planted tree somewhere in just a little urban streetscape, going, like, why are they doing that? Why don't they do stuff for me? What's this about? Not understanding the tree was for everyone. And it was just so sad to me. And it's like, really, to not have that fundamental appreciation of trees is good for everyone, trees is good for him, to feel somehow victimised because the council had planted a tree and he didn't feel included, was such a breakdown in his understanding of the way a decent society cares and functions, that it really kind of struck home for me that there was, that was wrong. And I appreciate my basic schooling that taught me that, it's not about right, it's not about class, in which I think I have to credit to my mum, that it's about, making the best of what you have, being fair to people, not being judgy, not being snobby, not being reliant on assessing that wealth is what makes you valuable. It's something different. And so those fundamentals have been just so important to being able to navigate a world that is not class, caste, race, wealth, anything like that. It's about judging people on what they do and how they act rather than surfaces. At this point in my life, I've got more than enough of everything, and I haven't spent a fortune along the way. There was one pair of shoes back in my life when I got some boots that were over $100, and then eventually I thought, why did I do that? It's, like,
We all
not
did that in our
necessarily
youth.
a good thing, and it turned out they weren't my favourite boots anyway, and it was just like, take a simple way, be frugal, spend less than you make. It's all you need to do.
Yep.
And whatever it takes, whichever way you achieve that, as long as you spend less than is coming in, you're slowly building a buffer zone, and that's all you need. When I discovered La Mama as a theatre space, I realised that you don't have to dress up to the theatre, you don't have to spend a fortune to get in, you don't have to book months in advance, and going to a small space is an intimate and fabulous experience. You're close with the audience, you're close with the performers, and there's no stress, there's no sort of you'll be laughed at because you're not wearing the right thing at this pretentious, operatic or whatever it may be. You find the ways that you can facilitate your joy without breaking the bank, and life is simple, life is pleasurable, support creativity, and the key is just never spend more than you make. I've created artworks when I was in the hospital, I've created artworks when I've taken time out, there's various little bits and pieces here that I made. I've never managed to sell something because I could never put a value on it because I undervalue what I make. But as far as posterity, I just want to be buried in a shroud and become compost. I don't need a plaque, I don't have dependents, I don't care, because traditionally I was off the hook because if I took a traditional path, I wouldn't pass on my family name anyway. So, at that level, no problem.
Yeah.
Yes, so you can see it used to be a much more streamlined access, but now we have the garden path.
Yeah, absolutely.
For years, Jane has been the dedicated presenter of her beloved program, Music Matters. Recently, in appreciation of this, 3CR put on a special afternoon tea for Jane, her friends and supporters. With terrific musicians performing, words of love spoken from many, it was a fitting tribute.
Yes, I'm a fan of Jane and all her works, and it's a bit of a celebration of that today.
Jane's making an entrance. So this is it, Jane?
This is so exciting and lovely to have everyone here. May the performances begin. the snacking continue. Thanks to all the caterers.
Yeah.
We'll have a lovely afternoon.
Just arrived at Jane's Do. They're all just setting up their musical equipment. The harp looks very fascinating. And of course, all the lovely food that the girls have been preparing.
Hi, I'm Georgia Vlasopoulos. I am Secretary of the Australia Western Sahara Association here in Victoria. Jane Brownrigg has been a loyal supporter of our group and has turned up to any activism that we've done as if she's fallen out of the sky, just like a little miracle, and assisted us whenever we've needed help. So thanks for that, Jane.
Hi Jane, it's Inez from 3CR and Dippers and the Sprouts, and I just want to thank you for all of your kindness and support and love, and you're just the best, and love you heaps.
Great.
Have a hug.
Sweet.
I'm so glad.
Hi Jane, I just wanted to take a moment to say how much I appreciate your camaraderie and cheerful spirit. It's always so enjoyable to meet up with you at film previews and openings and festivals, and I'm in awe of your phenomenal energy and your ability to fit in so many commitments and activities in each day. And I also admire your passion for music, especially Australian music, and how you've showcased a multitude of local artists and aired them on Music Matters on 3CR. And Jane, you're a champion for the environment, from your everyday activities like riding your floral festooned bike everywhere and your energy efficient house, to your support and promotion of campaigns. Involvement in global and local issues is unwavering, as is your upbeat and positive outlook on life. Cheers to you, Jane.
Okay.
Hey Jane, thank you so much for all your support and just being such an incredible person. And I'm going to make sure I never turn my guitar up too loud again.
This is a wild one.
My name's Liz and I've known Jane since the 1980s. We both participated in a market research session on the names of sexually transmitted diseases. We're the only two women there, and then afterwards we ended up down Greville Street having a drink, just to kind of debrief. We've been friends ever since. Now that's a very long time, and she's like a sister. And sometimes as sisters we don't always talk. The politics are not necessarily aligned, but we always come back together. And she's always been on my journey, so go Jane. She's good. Yeah, nice.
I first knew Jane by name before I actually knew who Jane was, and that was doing Radiothon. And as Jodie reminded me just before, we'd have all these shit CDs, you know, that we couldn't give away to our friends. So you couldn't gift to someone. So let's give these away as prizes to people who donate to Radiothon. So we'd say, okay, the next person who calls up and donates $10 can have this marvellous CD. And the phone would ring, and it would be Jane Brownrigg. Oh, there you go. Play another couple of songs. What's the next piece of shit we've got here? All right, anyone who donates $10 can get this piece of shit, marvellous CD. Phone rings, it's Jane Brownrigg. We just go on for most of the program. And we were thinking, how much money is this lady got? She must have donated $100 to buy a bunch of CDs that I couldn't have sold for $1 at Cash Converters. Then I'd go home and, you know, and a couple of weeks later the other community radio stations do their radiothons and I'd be tuning in. someone would say, oh, we've got some really good CDs this time and some really good tickets to something. If you call in, who calls in? Jane Brownrigg. Who is this person? Then, of course, we finally met Jane Brownrigg, and what a blessing she's been to all of us, especially to me, because I do the show that comes on right after Music Matters, Burning Vinyl. And Jane's actually also a presenter of that program on those days where I can't be fucked showing up. Thank you, Jane.
My pleasure.
I'm going to use this as a crutch. Jane, I've been in a wheelchair for longer than you, and I can show you a few tricks.
Yay!
The first one is, I need my flower slave. This is a great group of people, Jane. You can get them to do stuff for you when you're in a wheelchair. This is on behalf of 3CR, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
And thanks everybody for coming as well. If you're not here for a long time, make sure it's a good time.
I'm doing that, but you are my trailblazer, because I figure if you can come in your condition, I can follow in your footsteps.
Nice choice of words.
Huge love to East Mint, huge love to 3CR, PBS, Triple R, my greater community, because as Matt just alluded to, I always think about quality of life, not quantity, so you're all a huge part of the quality of my life, and I am so grateful and thankful. And I hope everyone's had a lovely afternoon, because I sure have. Thank you.
I've never listened to Music Matters. Never. And I have no intention of listening to it. And I've always felt that Cromwell and the Taliban are right regarding music. So I was a bit surprised. But I know why, because Jane has been a constant in my life over the past decade. Because you all may know her as a music mad hatter, but I know her as a community activist and a political activist. And many of the things we organise, she's there. Fashionably late, usually 5 to 10 minutes, on her bicycle, with a little yellow vest, and always with a helmet. She's always looks after herself. Things like the Mabo Day celebrations, Tanaminaway Morbohina, the West Papuans, public housing, environmental causes, you name it. There may be the organiser a dog, but Jane will turn up to make the numbers. Now, Jane is... She's compassionate, she's generous, she's intelligent, she's loving, she's an extraordinary human being. I'll give you an example. At the West Papuan Ren Collective do we had, I think it was last weekend, Jane had re-donated a ironbark chair which had been made by David Mackenzie to be re-auctioned. And when we asked why, she said, I'm just downsizing. I'm just downsizing. So she's an extraordinary human being, and I think we're all blessed, because in life and in death we are remembered not because of the assets we have acquired over a lifetime, or the power we exercise, but we're remembered by the influence we've had with other people, how we're touched. And to see Jane struggling in many regards highlights what an extraordinary human being she is. Instead of sitting at home, she's squeezing every last drop of life from a body which has deserted her. She's an extraordinary human being. And all I can say, Jane, is it's a pleasure to have known you. I feel as sad as you do about what's happening, like everybody else in this room, and that's why we're here. And you will never be forgotten. Thank you, Jane.
As I said, who bought a plate. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here on lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd like to extend my solidarity to all First Nations people here and on this continent and globally, and not acknowledge to First Peoples who are struggling for independence that 3CR has a long history of solidarity with Palestine and West Papua. May they be free. Yeah, it's a tough year ahead. Anyway, so we do need to bring in that word solidarity, and 3CR actually has, for our radiothon slogan, chosen Sound On for Solidarity. So yeah, it's the year for it. And solidarity is a word that immediately springs to mind when I think of Jane.
Thank you.
In fact, looking around this room and seeing a sea of representatives from 3 of Melbourne, NAM's community radio stations is a testament to Jane's ability to bring her joy and passion to different spaces and draw them together. You're a genius at it, Jane.
Thank you.
Your love of music, arts and social and environmental justice knows no bounds. You're always involved in promoting community culture, and you have a long history of supporting 3CR both as a listener, a subscriber, a Radiothon prize winner, and of course 10 years of Music Matters co-host with your terrific sidekick and co-pilot Joe Malignaggi. Well done, team. It's pretty good. You have excelled yourself fortnight after fortnight researching what's locally happening in NAM music scene and highlighting the events and talents of hundreds of artists through playing their music, interviewing them, and of course organising live to airs supported by 3CR's wonderful live to air techs, including the awesome Raya, who's helping us today on sound. And also such people as Lara Sulio and Meg Butler, and the incredible, much missed Michael Smith, who we dearly miss. Thanks again, Raya, for today. So not only have you been a stalwart member of 3CR through sickness and in health, and making programs even from hospital, remarkable, you've also volunteered for our community radio cousins, PBS and Triple R, and we'll hear now from Maddie from PBS.
I first met Jane in 2008 at a PBS end of year Christmas party. It was my probably first time attending a proper PBS event. I didn't really know how it ran, didn't know how to locker, but I knew there was a party and I wanted to get to know people. Other announcers could be a little bit intimidating, but I saw Jane saw me, we sat down on the couch, and chatted about music for hours and hours and hours. She already knew who I was. She knew the Australian music program that I was hosting. As an emerging presenter at the station, this meant so much that, hey, someone did care about what I was doing and cared about local music, only to realise that, like, of course Jane knew who I was. She was across the whole of the PBS grid, the whole of the 3CR grid, the whole of the Triple R grid, the whole of the, you know, the weekend gig guide of whatever was going on in Melbourne. But yeah, if music mattered to anyone, it was to Jane. So to find her first off was really a blessing. I know at PBS she has just instigated so many large and small changes that make us be better, and that's just not only my observations but friends and colleagues at the station as well. Little big things like, you know, a composting system, things like that, making sure all our plastic packaging and mail-out materials are all recycled, knowing that we've got soft plastic recycling. Last week I dropped her off at 3CR for her program, and then we swung by PBS afterwards so she could collect the compost and take it home still.
And have a coffee.
You know, and have a coffee, but, you know, you've got to love what you do, and if anything was symbiotic, it's Jane supporting community radio and community music, and then attending every bloody gig in town as well. And that also goes for creatives in other fields like visual arts, activism, our environment, sustainability. I remember sharing with Jane, upset that a neighbour had had their huge gum tree cut down, and, you know, just for aesthetic development reasons. And Jane was part of a sort of a seed bank, like seasonally propagating seeds that would then go out and be sown where needed. And she gave me one of these saying, like, I know your tree was cut down and it meant a lot, so here's this one, and, like, it'll grow. And it did. And I have goosebumps, and I will always remember, Jane, your strong fingers covered in silver rings, perhaps one for every year of community radio, with rings on her fingers and bells, flowers and bumper stickers on her bike. Jane has had music through all her days and nights.
Yay!
Thank you.
I'd also like...
But this is where the real action is taking place, outside.
And so much, and yeah, it's very special. Thank you so much to Leanne for organising this.
Thank you, East Mid, for hosting, of course, my joy and just total respect and love. Thank you.
Correct, and I reiterate everything that's been said today. I should mention that Jane is the reason why I ended up volunteering at 3CR. I was looking for work for a couple of years, and she said, well, you should just volunteer at 3CR. So I did reception for 5 years. And she's the reason why I probably know most of you in this room, pretty much. So it's pretty wild. And also the musicians that perform today, it's all part of the story. I'm very humbled and privileged to have the opportunity to be a broadcaster in community radio, especially with 3CR. I've been listening to them on and off since the late 70s. And meeting the musicians that have played today, and also now with Genevieve Fry, who's an extraordinary, generous human being. East Mint is an extraordinary independent place in this town. And Gemma doing her work, their work as well, with La Mama Musica. And Jane's introduced me to an extraordinary lifestyle. My partner has been very supportive of that as well, obviously. But Jane's given me plenty of hints along the way how to maintain getting out there, socialising, which includes activism as well. But I must thank 3CR for that, obviously. And once again, thanks for being here, folks, and your patience for us to run over time. And it wouldn't be a Jane gig if we weren't over time. Because we just got to fit it all in, don't we, Jane? Correct. So thanks again, everybody. Enjoy this little finale for today with Genevieve and Gemma.
I'm thinking about the moon. As the earth turns, the water sloshes, the tides of the oceans moving with its orbit. Satellite that balances the tilt of the earth. Set the seasons in motion. Shining in the night sky. Drifting away 4 centimetres each year. If we go back 4.5 billion years. 4.5 billion years ago, when the solar system was still forming, the chaos, the asteroid belt, comets, meteors, rocks, ice, gases, all drifting in from space. And the earth is young, a ball of red hot molten rock, burning hot. In places, a crust forms. The lighter gases, metals drip to the top. Heavy metals, iron, sink deeper, form a magnetic core. There's no atmosphere yet. It's too hot. Asteroids, meteoroids, bringing water, minerals from space. But a planet the size of Mars is in an orbit not unlike Earth. And at some point they draw closer, closer, until they collide in slow motion. 2 molten bodies become one. The collision bursts apart both, but the gravitational field is enough to hold it together. Part of it cleaves off and forms a mass here. The so it begins.